Today we're looking at a very unique firearm. This is the American precision firearm Strike Two Compact. Now this gun has quite a bit of history, and a lot of you might be familiar with the Strike One, which is kind of a full-size striker-fired pistol, 9mm gun that I believe at one point was in like talks for military contracts, not in America, but in other countries. And this gun has gone kind of extinct for a while before they brought it back as a compact version, now with the popularity of concealed carry and just people wanting a more simplistic and more available option. Now, to go through some of the features of this gun, we first have to discuss what kind of gun this is. This, for a lot of people, they'll look at it like, okay, it's another variant of some kind of weird looking Glock of some kind, and that's pretty much it. But the entire mechanism of this gun is very different than conventional pistols that you might be familiar with. The two biggest highlights about this gun is that most commonly available pistols today have a tilting barrel mechanism, which means when the gun fires, the barrel you see in the locked back position is not straight. It's angled upward in order to be able to have the function of the gun work the way that it needs to. This gun, on the other hand, if I lock back the slide, you could see how straight the front of the barrel is. This uses a tilting locking system, which means it goes directly back into the recoil of the gun through the slide, which means recoil is going to be usually significantly easier to mitigate because since all that recoil is going directly into you, that's where you usually have control of the gun itself. The second thing that's a big talking point for this particular gun is that the bore axis, the actual barrel, is lower than a conventional gun. So this might be hard to tell, but if I tilt the gun just slightly lower, you can see how just the top part of the actual slide, you see how the barrel is a little bit lower than another gun. So between the direct blowback action, as well as the barrel being tilted slightly lower, it makes for a more comfortable shooting experience. Now, I spoke to the people at APF, and what they were telling me is that this gun is not designed for a person who's getting their first gun. This is kind of a gun for a person who wants something that's a unique style or unique action that they might want to be able to kind of have to their collection. A part of this is that, first of all, this comes in two different variations. This is the polymer lower, so it's a little bit lighter. It does feel more heavy, obviously, because the top is significantly heavier. The reason being is that the top is a fully one-piece machined piece of aluminum, which means that it's all machined from one block. So if you could actually tell, all these cuts, it's all MIM. You can see how everything over here is drilled and machined from one piece, and it actually looks really, really nice because it's all done from one piece of aluminum, similar to a billet lower receiver or upper receiver that you might have for your AR-15. This is made from one piece of machined part, which just makes the whole thing, the fit and finish, really nice. This is ultimately a striker-fired pistol. So if you look at the back and I pull the trigger, you see how there's the indicator over there. That is a striker-fired mechanism. The trigger on this is actually pretty unique because for an out-of-the-box trigger for a striker-fired pistol, this is probably the best you'll be able to get out of the box, where if we do a quick check with the trigger pull, so this is you see a flat-faced kind of trigger. So this is the take-up, this is the wall, and then we'll do the brake. That's the brake. I'll do a rack. And let's look for the reset. Click. And then fire. It is a very nice feeling out-of-the-box gun. Now, something that I found to be extremely unique is that everyone who I handed this gun to, the grip texture on this gun is very, very interesting. The best way I've heard someone describe it, I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, is that it almost feels like a velvety kind of material. It's obviously still like a polymer, but the way that it's machined and the different types of designs that they have throughout, which does help with your grip, it also just feels really soft to the touch, which is just an interesting feeling to get on this kind of gun. You can see how the undercut is pretty solid, where it does go pretty nicely high, and you could get obviously a very good purchase on the gun itself. And when it comes to the takedown mechanism, it's using a simple single pin takedown. So this is able to be popped out, and I'll show you obviously a close-up of it fully disassembled. You can see how the barrel and the guide rod and how the tilting block all works together to kind of make this come apart. Now, what's interesting also is that this right now is only available in the RMR-CC footprint, so the smaller footprint. You might have seen the video I made recently on the O side that you guys could check out. And I found that to be pretty interesting for a gun that's pretty much the width of a Glock 19 or a Glock 17. I wonder why they kind of went with the first RMR CC as opposed to kind of like a regular RMR style footprint, but that's what they have available at the moment. To get this installed was a bit of a process. Right now, since the stuff is like so like well machined, these tolerances are extremely tight. So much so that it comes with the plate in the box that you might be able to see. There's the actual optic, and then there's the plate just below it that you might be able to see the slight discoloration, the difference over there. But I had to take this plate, and they said that they recommended even using like a rubber mallet to really hit it in place, which makes me feel kind of two different ways about this. The fit and finish is really, really, really tight. But at the same time, it makes me like beg the question of like, at what point is too much perfection too much? Because like it was just, if like I have to use a mallet to actually get it in place, that means that it might be just a bit too tight, where you could get away with like an ever so slight amount of looseness to be able to make the process a little bit easier than whacking it with a mallet. But it did fit in place really well. It comes with screws that are recessed, so it goes in, and then your optic actually mounts to the plate after. But again, knowing that from what I was told is that the plates that go onto that attach to the actual slide are hand finished. So they are machined initially and then hand finished to fit, so that again the tolerances are really tight. So again, if you're looking for like a bomb-proof kind of mounting option, this clearly is going to be within that category. Now, since the barrel is actually in like almost full direct blowback, it has a 20-degree shift from the recoil axis as opposed to a conventional like 45-degree, which means again, that's going to be able to help significantly with recoil. You could get this in a full metal bottom as well. The APF is really known for making a lot of competition style guns. So if you look on their website, they have some crazy looking guns that are like the competition kind of style that you can look at. So this is kind of fitting into their duty / concealed carry use to competition, where it kind of feeds into features of both, of like the machining work, the trigger that comes out of the box for a striker fired pistol, the takedown and the direct blowback all helps with things that will enhance your performance. They do have offerings as well that will come with a threaded barrel, which makes me also wonder, I'd be very curious to see if they are able to comp a gun like this, which between the low barrel axis, compensator, and the direct blowback, what that would look like, because that sounds in my head to be something that would be really cool to be able to try out. They also do have upgrades for the trigger that if you want something even a little bit more higher end, you'd be able to get that as well. In the con side, a few small things that I noticed is that I guess the way that the magazine release is set up is that when I'm holding the gun and I want to do a mag swap, I have to be very cautious that on the opposite side, although most guns have, obviously all guns have the opposite side, this felt to be a little bit more of a protrusion, where if I don't do it just right and I push it, I feel myself push against the opposite side of the magazine release, and that could get the magazine stuck. So it's something small that you have to just be aware of being able to remove it. The other thing is that since this gun is still fairly new to the market, like you probably have seen the Strike One somewhere on YouTube. There's a lot of big name guys who've made videos on the Strike One. This is one of the first I've been seeing, like this video is gonna be one of the first on the Compact, which is still fairly new. That being said, holster selection is still gonna be somewhat limited. I was using a Glock 19 holster and it seemed to work okay, but there's no way that it's actually designed and set for it to be like that. So I'd caution you to make sure that you're going to have your trigger guard covered if that's something you're going to want to do. So that's going to be the next thing about compatibility with holsters, because it's just fairly new to the market. Lastly is that it does take proprietary magazines. So this is the magazine. They came with 2 from the factory. These magazines hold 15 rounds each. So again, very similar to a Glock 19 in that regard, but they are proprietary, which means you need to make sure that you have these on hand if it's going to be a gun you're going to carry a lot of, to be able to get additional, because 2 is not going to be enough, and being able to order them from anywhere else other than APF might be complicated because I don't know if they're available anywhere. So it just might be something that you'd want to consider. Overall, when I was shooting this, I did feel a difference in the recoil mitigation. However, to my error, I was shooting this alongside a gun that had a full compensator and it was kind of a competition style gun. I will probably need to go back to the range and shoot it against the gun that's very stock so I could feel more of the difference that the recoil is able to do. However, there were rapid fire drills that I was running with it that I was able to keep all the groupings like fairly tight for the speed that I was running it at, and I was able to keep the reticle in the optic on target the entire time, which just shows that it was doing its job. But you really need to be someone who's shot a lot of guns before, not just a Glock 19 or things like that, to notice and feel the difference between the recoil mitigation between these 2 guns. This, I would say, is very similar to how SIG came out with like the ported option for their slides for like the P365 like XL, where it does make a difference, but unless you're very in tune with guns, you might not feel how significant of a difference it is actually making. And then of course, once you go to a compensator, it just makes an entirely different difference. So it's just going to be something you have to be able to, be fine-tuned with. So overall, this is a very interesting gun. If you're looking for something more unique that's still like very new to the market and not readily available for a lot of people to have, out of the box for a striker-fired gun, this is a very affordable gun, considering that it's fully machined, it has a lower bore axis, direct blowback, all those features. This comes in at under $800 for like the full setup, which I think is very fair for this particular gun. So this is not like a gun that they're like, we're like in direct competition to like a Glock style gun, which it's not. The firing mechanism and everything is different, but it's still coming out at a very reasonable price point that makes it, I guess, worth being able to take a look at. So if you like any more information, I'll leave a link in the description down below to American Precision Firearms. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. This is Raziel Cohen with the TacticalRabbi.com. Thank you for watching.